Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Guys, welcome back to r/EntitledPeople, where a mom thinks that she can ignore no trespassing and beware of aggressive dog signs, all because her kid wants to pet the dog. Guys, before we dive into the stories today, take a look at these two women in a restaurant. Okay, so a little bit of context. These two women are social media influencers who ordered a fancy cake just for the sake of pictures. The women never planned on eating it. So when the servers came back a little while later to ask how the cake was, one of them says, quote, "Why the F would I eat your cake?" So apparently after enough verbal abuse, the waiters decided to give the rude Karens a taste of their own medicine with a cake to the face, which is absolutely beautiful. My friends, if you think that was crazy, wait until you hear the stories in today's episode. As always, I hope you enjoy the tales, hit subscribe if you haven't, and don't shake your heads too hard. Okay, so I'm a French American and I live near Paris. A few months ago, I had to renew my American passport because the old one expired. It was the first time I had to renew it, and I was 18 at the time, so I decided to go to the American embassy, or consulate. I'm not sure which one exactly. I went without my mother for the first time to get things done on my own like a big boy. Now, usually hanging out with my mom in any public place means that people immediately learn that we're Americans. We usually speak English when there's not too many people around and speak French in big crowds out of respect for people around us. But her thick accent usually rats us out as Americans. Anyways, since she didn't come with me that day, it meant that people wouldn't automatically assume that I was American. This is important for the rest of the story. So the day of the meeting, I show up at the embassy, 15 minutes before the time of the meeting as instructed, and the line to get in is a mess. There are two TSA checks, one outdoors and one indoors. In between the two, the line of people is orderly. But before the first TSA check, everybody was just bunched up and participating in the Hunger Games in order to get in before everybody else. When I got there, I phoned my mom, anxious that I would be late for my meeting. She told me to just go to the TSA agents and tell them that I had a meeting, blah blah blah. When I hung up, the French people around me told me that Americans had been called forth earlier, so I got to skip the first line by just waving my passport in the air. It turns out having an American passport at the American embassy makes you a VIP. So I'm waiting in line for the second TSA check, and I'm waiting for the TSA agent to call me to the building. As I'm waiting, I hear commotion behind me. A Karen is pushing everybody aside yelling, "I'm American! I have priority! Let me through!" Now, the woman had a 5-ish-year-old boy with her. As she gets to my level, she tries to push me aside yelling, "Hey, I have to get my boy his passport." Now, that woman was about 5 feet tall with her arms up, and I'm 6 feet tall, and I don't budge easily. She looks at me in shock and she shouts, "How dare you? I'm American. I have every right over you here. Now let me pass." I had all my papers out in my left hand, and my current passport at the time was underneath it, so she couldn't have known that I was American. The TSA agent gestures to me to come forth, and Karen immediately cuts in front of me, telling her boy, "Come on, James, we can finally go in," and yanks his arm. At this, I gently but firmly grab her by the shoulder, stop her in her tracks, and move forward. She then looks me dead in the eye and says, "What's wrong with you? Do you not know that you're in an American embassy? I should go first. I told you I'm American." Now, as she says this, I pull my passport from underneath my papers, wave it to her face and say, "Well, so am I." That's when one of the TSA agents from the first control post came to take her back to the start of the line. As I entered the building, I shouted back, "Enjoy waiting in line with the French people," and proceeded with the protocol. I would have loved to have seen her face when OP pulls out his American passport, like, holy crap. Like, this woman is something else, guys. Power tripping and expecting to be treated like royalty because she's in an American embassy as an American. Way to represent Karen. Okay, so a little bit of backstory. I'm 22 years old and my neighbor is 18 years old. We grew up together since she was born. For years now, she's begged her parents for a dog, and she volunteered at the shelter to learn proper caring. So last month for her birthday, she got the okay to pick any dog she wanted. She chooses a 5-year-old greyhound from the shelter that was known for aggressive behavior towards everybody but her, due to an abusive past. He had bonded with her and she called him Snoop because she's a huge Snoop Dogg fan and she saw the chance for a pun. Now, to make sure that Snoop couldn't hurt anybody, they had put a higher fence around their yard, and they had put a lock on both gates after we found out that he can open doors when he attacked me while gardening. Also, they planted bushes along the fence and placed several warning signs saying, "Warning, aggressive dog, will bite and attack." do not touch, let out, or go in. Now, that should have been idiot-proof, right? Well, not so much. So last Saturday, we had a neighborhood girls-only barbecue at my place. It was 11 girls, ages 7 to 22, because we're a bunch of sisters, honestly. Neighbor and I made sure that none of the younger girls could even accidentally open the gate, as Snoop was outside their yard, and even with my neighbor there, he was still being aggressive. She was in the process of having him professionally trained, and it was all starting to get better, but they still had a long way to go. To allow exits from their yard into ours, the gate is locked with a mere-long hook that wasn't reachable for kids. We had all been hanging out for hours now when all of a sudden, Snoop starts to bark aggressively. Again, we didn't quite care since one of us had probably gotten too close to the fence while playing, and we were dead wrong about that. One of the girls comes up to us saying that there's somebody that they didn't know with Snoop, and that's when we heard the screaming. My neighbor and I run over to see a woman repeatedly kicking an aggressive Snoop away over and over again, and she's still kicking at him even when he starts to back off. Her daughter was on the ground behind her, one hand completely red from blood, screaming in pain. We had absolutely no idea who they were, how they got in, or why they had gotten in. At this point, my neighbor's screaming at them saying, "Stop! Stop! What are you doing?" She pushed the woman back to put herself in front of her dog. The woman then screams at my neighbor saying, "This dog just bit my daughter. It's such an aggressive beast." My neighbor says to her, "Why are you even in our backyard?" To this, the woman says, "My daughter wanted to pet your dog. Now look at her." It was at this point that I snapped back into reality. Each party had somebody injured here. The girl was crying and Snoop didn't even bark at the strangers anymore. I entered the yard and Snoop doesn't even budge at all. There's definitely something wrong with him. I tell my neighbor to take care of her dog, and then I ask the woman, "Ma'am, does your daughter need an ambulance?" That at least broke them apart, but the girl did indeed need an ambulance as her hand and wrist looked pretty torn up. So I made the call, and because it had to be done, I called the police as well. The ambulance arrived with a police car in tow, and it was at that moment that I knew that we were doomed. My neighbor at this time had called the home call vet. Snoop wasn't doing well either, and I had never seen the dog this quiet, and I actually feared for the worst. Two policemen exit the car and approach me first, and the police officer says, "Are you the caller? Can you tell us exactly what happened?" I tell him, "Yeah, so this woman and her daughter somehow got in here to pet the dog, but the dog has aggression issues, which he's in training for, and then the situation escalated. Her daughter was bitten, and the woman injured my neighbor's dog." The second police officer asked, "So who's the dog's owner?" I then pointed to my neighbor and said, "That would be her." At this moment, my neighbor was crying. She had Snoop in her arms, and she was begging for him not to leave her, so the policeman kept talking to me and said, "Do you know her well?" I told him, "I do. We've lived next door to each other our whole lives. We were in my yard having a barbecue when this happened, and I have no idea who these two are or how they got in here. The gate's locked, so they must have climbed the fence." And at this, the woman burst into the conversation saying, "Of course we climbed the fence. The door was locked, and my daughter wanted to pet the dog." Now, I was baffled at how stupidly she had just admitted to that. We then all got distracted for a moment when the vet shows up. I say to the woman, "Ma'am, there are literally warning signs all around the house saying don't trespass, there's an aggressive dog in the yard. Why would you climb the fence? You injured her dog and your daughter got hurt too." The woman then says, "Every dog owner has these signs up. They don't mean anything. We've never been attacked like that before." I'm thinking, oh my goodness, yes, she was indeed that dumb, saying that this wasn't her first time trespassing on a stranger's property. I wanted to lose it on her. The officer then asked me, "Ma'am, you said this dog has a reputation. Were there former attacks?" Now at this I was torn to answer. Sure, I was dooming Snoop, but I had to tell the truth because it was an officer and I didn't want to lie. I say to the officer, well, he does have aggression issues. Everybody here knows that." The officer then asked, "But there were other attacks?" I tell him only one, on me, right after they took him in last month. He got out of his yard. At this, they merely nodded it off, going to talk to my neighbor. I stop the woman, who was about to stomp after them. I tell her, "Hey, you've done enough damage here. Maybe try being a mom and see your kid." She then screams at me saying, "How dare you?" Now, she was actually raising her hand, threatening to slap me. I then say loudly, "Do it. I want a reason to hit you. I don't care anymore." A few minutes later, the mom and the kid were off in the ambulance, and the vet was taking Snoop to the animal clinic. The policeman said that we would be notified about everything else and left as well. Neighbor took her bike to the clinic following Snoop, and I had to tell her parents everything when they came home, and it was horrible. And of course, the party was over too. The following Friday, when I came home from work, I was called to the neighbors, where I found my neighbor crying over Snoop's blanket. He had died that morning due to the injuries that he had suffered from that horrible woman. On Saturday, in the mail, came the order to put Snoop down. They had considered him too dangerous due to several attacks that have happened. We felt like the world had shattered. Judgment had been passed over an abused and abandoned dog whose second chance in life had been ruined by an entitled mother who thought that warning signs were some sort of meaningless joke, and the terms of private property didn't apply to her. Since it's only been a week, I can't say who will be held responsible for what. There were no further trials yet, but if that woman doesn't get what she deserves for trespassing and killing Snoop, I'm gonna lose faith in the law. Guys, what a heartbreaking story, and I'm so upset at the situation. That woman not only endangered her own daughter by ignoring those signs and breaking into someone else's property, but a dog ended up losing his life over some stupid decision that the woman made because her daughter wanted to pet a dog. So OP does come back with an update, and the update reads, guys, it happened. They managed to prove that this wasn't the first time that that woman and her kid had trespassed to pet a dog. Along with that, they had proved that she damaged fences and gates to get to the animals. She's got a couple of other people charging her for that now. Also, the woman ended up losing custody of her daughter. Kind of sad for the girl, but maybe better too. Throughout my life, I've worked part-time on and off at a GameStop near where my parents live. During my time there, I've had my fair share of clueless parents. Now, when I say clueless, I'm not trying to be mean. A lot of parents don't play games themselves or with their kids, so they often struggle when trying to find something. And occasionally, they're also looking for something that we either don't sell or flat out doesn't exist. Now, most of the time, I can help the parents find something that they need, or inform them of the mythical status of what they're looking for, and the parents are usually nice about it. But in everybody's life, a little Karen must fall. So one day, I was reorganizing the PlayStation section when I was tapped on the shoulder. Now, that honestly should have been the first clue that something was off, but I turned around to see a woman who was maybe in her early 40s with a fairly impatient look on her face. In retrospect, she was giving all the telltale signs of being a Karen, and I didn't know how to prepare myself. She says, "I'm looking for Mario Kart." Now, she said that without a please or "would you help me find?" That was just a direct statement. I say to her, "Oh, okay, our Nintendo section is right over there," pointing to the back corner of the store. Now, were you looking for it on the 3DS, Wii U, or something else? At this, Karen noticeably rolls her eyes at me and says, "For the PlayStation." Now, she said that with a very clear, yet unspoken, "you idiot," added to the end. I tell her, "Oh, I'm sorry, but they don't make Mario Kart for the PlayStation. It's published by Nintendo, so they only release it for their own consoles." At this, Karen says to me, "You must be mistaken. My son says he wants it for the PlayStation." I told her, "I'm sorry, but they really don't make any Mario game for non-Nintendo systems." She then says again, "Well, my son says he played it at a friend's house and that it was on PlayStation, so..." At this point, I'm absolutely dumbfounded, and I said, "Maybe he was mistaken?" Now, Karen audibly gasped and said, "Are you calling my son a liar?" I told her, no, "How dare you call my son, whom you've never ever met, a liar?" she said. At this point, I was just done with the interaction. Still scrounging up what little customer service patient I had, I said in a polite but firm tone, "I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you. What you're looking for doesn't exist. You can even ask my coworker right there. In fact, that person's my boss. He'll probably tell you the same answer." Karen then huffs at me and she marches over to my boss. I turned around and went back to reorganizing the shelf. She says, "That employee right there has been lying to me, and he's been wasting my time." Now, I couldn't see my boss's face, but I could hear the confusion in his voice when he says, "Oh, what about?" Karen says, "He was telling me that they don't make Mario Kart for the PlayStation, even though I told him that my son said it was. Then, he accused my little boy of being a liar." Now, at this, there was a slight pause, and then I hear my boss say, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but they really don't make Mario Kart for any Sony systems. That game series only comes out on Nintendo systems." Now, I couldn't help myself, so I turned my head so I could watch. I expected Karen to blow up on my boss, but he was just staring her down, and she looked like whatever objection she was about to spout was caught in the back of her throat. She then lowered her head and hurried out of the store. I gave my boss the "what the heck was that all about" shoulder shrug. He said, "Don't worry about it." Now, I've had a lot of weird encounters with customers and entitled parents, but I've never had one call me a liar just because I wouldn't help her find something that wasn't real. So this story happened about an hour ago. Just got finished and calmed down enough. So on my way to work, I realized that I needed to get some gas, so I go to my usual Chevron nearby. It was moderately busy this morning for whatever reason. This Chevron has 3 rows of double pumps, and each pump is double-sided. I ended up making a turn and reversing into one row since most of the others are full with cars already. Now, the row I reversed into, both the front and back pumps were empty, so of course I could just take the front pump. It makes it easier to leave and allow someone from the other side to fill up at the rear pump. So as I'm getting into position, I brake and come to a full stop. Literally a split second away from putting my car into park, I'm jolted forward. I immediately realized that someone had rear-ended me. Now this wasn't a 30-mile-per-hour rear end or anything like that, but also not 2 miles per hour. I'm perfectly fine, so I park and get out to see what happened. And I'm met by an entitled Karen. She's roughly 250 pounds, 5'2", and a psychopath who doesn't waste a breath screaming at me, claiming that I backed into her vehicle. I was totally caught off guard, and I was stunned for a moment or two. My Lexus SUV had a dented bumper, and her car, however, the bumper had completely fallen off of her early 2000s Kia. I asked to trade insurance, and she's just screaming nonsense about taking me to court and suing me. The woman actually calls the cops when I told her that she caused the accident and I was at a full stop. It was wild. The manager of the gas station eventually comes out to see the commotion, and he asks both of us to just leave, but the woman won't give me her insurance and she starts demanding money on the spot for repairs to her car. Now, I know the cops will never show up for this, and I'm just about to give up on insurance, when all of a sudden a random cop car pulls in. We wave him over, and each of us explains our side, and he's smart enough to ask the gas station manager if there's security footage. No clue why I didn't think of that, of course there is. The security camera is not the best quality, but it's sure damn good enough to confirm that I was at a full stop with my brake lights on, and it shows the woman ramming into me probably at about 10 or 12 miles per hour, and she's on her phone. The cop decided to not issue a ticket, but he forces her and I to trade insurance info, and he writes up a report for me. I'll also be getting a copy of the security footage to hand to my insurance to deal with it at this point. By the end, she was just completely silent, no longer a ranting and raving lunatic. If only she could have been a normal person from the start. This might not have been a big deal. I'm pretty sure this is going to be a slam dunk for my insurance to collect and fix my car, and she'll be 100% at fault. Wow guys, did this woman really rear-end OP's car and then call the cops about it and forgot about the cameras? Yeah, let's just try to get cops on my side for something that was 100% my fault. Karen logic. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our entitled people. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the stories in this one, and if you missed yesterday's episode on the channel, a crazy grandma Karen ruins her granddaughter's 2nd birthday by being crazy. Check it out if you haven't, and myself and Steva will see you guys in the next one. We love you.